Speaking of TK and being right, TK,
Right with a capital W.
You claimed on this very show, 2020 is the year that Craig Wright needs to prove himself, needs to make good on all of his bold claims. Otherwise, you're done, or he's a fraud, or something. I don't remember what exactly you said.
I didn't say that last part.
It was implied. Come on.
He doesn't want to get sued.
I think what you said is, TK, if it doesn't happen, then you're going to pay us all one BSV each, if I remember.
One? I thought it was
10?
100.
Oh.
TK, 2020, what did you learn about Dr. Craig Stephen Wright, Esquire, MMD Phil, whatever other accolades associated?
I'm trying to pull up.
What kind of chef was he? A Michelin rated, a brazier?
Well, there are rumors that he told Bitcoin Belle, who was the woman who organized his event for where he came out and said that Bitcoin was Turing complete. And there were rumors that she had shared emails or something like that between them, where he had told her he was like a 5-star Michelin chef or something like that.
That's right.
His old LinkedIn account said something about him being like a provincial French saucier or something like that. I don't know.
So make me the egg souffle in a public setting where it's independently verifiable by multiple people, and then you can back up. No, TK, 2020, Craig Wright, what'd you learn?
I have come to the conclusion after seeing what was and was not accomplished in 2020 that you guys were absolutely right 100% about something you said last year that I thought was like, y'all just bothered by something I'm not bothered by. And now I believe it's a completely insurmountable argument. And that is all social capital pertaining to announcements in the BSV community has been completely used up. What I mean by that is there is literally no promise that anyone who works on BSV can possibly make that can generate more excitement than the promises that have already been made that have not been delivered on. I'm still bullish on BSV. I still think it's far more likely that everything fails than that BSV uniquely loses. But I think it's like a boxer who before the match says all this really bold stuff. I'm going to knock his head off in the first round, et cetera, gets in the match, doesn't do that in the first round. In the second round, takes a couple of heavy blows, doesn't even land a punch. In the third round, he's still on his feet. And it's kind of like, all right, I believe this guy can still win. And if he wins, no one's going to care about the trash that he talked. But let's be clear. I don't want to hear anything that this guy has to say. The only way that he can possibly be impressive is by actually delivering. So I do think we have had plenty of time. If you go back to late 2018, all the way through 2019, there were a lot of specific predictions and promises made. And I think we'd all agree that Craig was probably the most interesting or one of the most interesting personalities in crypto because of all these things that he said. And we've had plenty of time to see some of that be executed on. Even on the business side, a lot of the things that Calvin said, we've had plenty of time to see that executed on. And I think it's been so underwhelming. I'm not mad. I don't need anybody to pump my backs. I create a life where I don't need that. I've said that before. There's no scenario where you're going to see me crying. But although I still believe in that BSV is going to succeed, I believe that these guys and the things that they say are now completely uninteresting and boring. I think personalities like Elon, Moist, and Jack are far more interesting. But more importantly, nearly every project that is happening on BSV is far more interesting and impactful than almost anything that I'm hearing Craig and Calvin say.
I'm going to lose some people with this, but you said it's a boxer analogy, the boxer that talks trash and everything. There's an even better one, TK. It's LeVar Ball. And like LeVar Ball was the most interesting thing in the NBA for a good couple minutes. And he made a couple crazy predictions before they happened, like that the Lakers were going to draft his son which seemed a little crazy. They did. And it was like, oh my God, this guy, whatever, he's crazy. If his son would have had even just like one 30-point game or like done something, LeVar Ball could have stayed interesting, but you just can't use hype for that long without anything to back up your claims. You got to have something. Now in LeVar Ball's case, at least he has 2 other sons that will give him 2 more bites at the apple to kind of keep hyping, and maybe they'll do something. But with Craig, it's like, we gave you quite a bit of time you were interesting because of your claims, and because some of your claims were like, had a little bit something there that no one else was willing to say. And maybe there's a little, this is cool. Now, there's nothing interesting about any claims coming out of Calvin and Craig just because of the lack of coming through. So as you said, if BSV is going to succeed, it's going to succeed completely independent from anything those guys are saying or not doing, I think.
Hey, let me launch a preemptive strike really quick, because I can see a lot of people listening to this, because whenever anybody criticizes anything, people are always like, well, why don't you stop waiting for them to do something and you be the one to do something about it? So I want to make something really clear here. I'm not saying that they owe us anything. I don't think Craig and Calvin owe anybody anything, right? So that's not it. And nobody's butthurt about anything that they've done. But when you say things like EHR data, we're going to see some action on that in 2020. And literally the only action that we see is the founder dies. Now that's tragic, right? That's terrible, that's tragic. But we don't see any action pertaining to that. When you say things like BTC, SegWit exploit, gonna be destroyed by this date, and that doesn't happen. No problem, you didn't owe me any of that. Doesn't change the quality of my life. When you say things like, I'm going to win a single court case, which is my modestly reworded version of what they actually said. And every court case that you've initiated has failed embarrassingly, or you've quietly backed it away, or it's been thrown off. Once you build up that kind of track record, that's all fine, but you can't post a comment to Kim.com saying, hey, your project is violating Craig's patents, and expect that to be interesting to anyone. Like, there is nothing that you can say you're going to do that can be interesting because of all the things that have been left undone. But yeah, I don't even expect anything from that camp anymore. They become completely boring to me, but I remain excited about all the cool things the Inklings are doing. I think that's fascinating.
I feel like we're back where we were almost exactly a year ago, where I'm kind of now on BCH again. TK's still BSV, Isaac's in the middle, and I guess Derek has changed position to being like BTC now.
Derek's a core Blockstream infiltrating Maxi now, right, Derek?
Yeah. So my thought is that you guys have all stayed poor because you didn't follow my investment advice, like I said several months ago, and was given so much crap for. And
no, we didn't give you crap. In fact,
no, you guys didn't give me crap. That's true.
We agreed with you, but we all said that we thought
you enjoyed being poor more. That's it.
Exactly. We said we invest for psychological reasons as well, yeah. Derek.
No, so yeah, my thought is more like, and by the way, I love the meme that I'm a BTC maxi now. Let's run with that. I'll be the resident BTC troll, but my thought is more like BTC. It's clearly got the mainstream finance narrative, and it's wrapped around its thumb. Like, that's it. It's won that for now. It may be changed in the future, but right now it's got it. I think there's going to be a ton of FOMO. I think higher price increases will actually bolster more money moving into the market, and we may see a good period of time where the number continues to go up. And during that period of time, I definitely see no reason to really hold any other coin. But
I also, I feel like a year ago as well was about the time that I personally was starting to come over to BSV just because they were getting a lot of things right. BCH was getting a lot of things wrong. But two big things happened in the past year. One, like the point at which I thought, okay, BSV looks like it's got a better shot is with the EHR data thing. And I was like, I just want one legitimate company to start using this thing because the tech is great. And then it's going to be off to the races. And they fooled me. Craig and Calvin's little thing fooled me because I thought because it looked like the guy that was the EHR founder looked legitimate. He had like built legitimate businesses. And then as time goes on, it looks less and less legitimate. And then eventually they make an announcement saying, well, we're not even going to be using the BSV blockchain outside of putting hashes inside of it, which is like, there's nothing special or unique about that at all. That's not using the MetaNet idea. That's using the blockchain for a purpose that everybody knew it could be used for. And then on the BCH side, the problem is BCH had gangrene because the lead dev, Omri Sachet, was a doofus that nobody saw in time, tried to take over the protocol, get himself paid, but he was cut out. I mean, he forked off, and now BCH doesn't have this doofus dev. They have some other devs that are going to be a problem in the future. But to me, it looks like, well, the tables have turned, and now BCH just looks more legitimate. Also, Kim.com came out and had an announcement saying that he's going to be trying to incorporate BCH into his project. And I'm like, okay,
that's no bigger than EHR data. That's my prediction.
Oh, I think it is. I feel like Kim has had more recent success than the EHR data people, and it's a more clear use case for using it for payments than EHR was for using BSV for data.
I don't get it. What's the use case? I went to the website.
Yeah, the website's irrelevant right now, to be honest.
Okay. So why are you announcing something and having an irrelevant website?
I think.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why he. You can go to his website. It's clear that it's all outdated content. I don't know why.
I feel like I'm like the cynic now. I feel, even though we're in the middle of a bull market that I think will continue for some time, probably BTC more so than others, and then some others, Ethereum, even though it like literally doesn't work at all and it's like fees of $50 to $100. Something, it's crazy. In the middle of this bull market, I am more frustrated than I think I've ever been with all versions of Bitcoin. And there's this inconvenient truth, to use a horribly abused phrase. BSV just hands down has the best tech. But that doesn't really matter in terms of the speculative investments in the phase that we're in. And I don't know that it even matters in terms of business adoption long-term. It's just the narrative is so bad. The paucity of talent and money and energy going in. There's a small group of bootstrap people who are really cool, doing some really cool stuff, but it's a very small crew. I just don't know if that's going to compete fast enough. BTC has more monetary upside in the near to midterm than I think anything, in terms of the price is probably going to keep going up, while at the same time being utterly unthreatening to the status quo fiat banking system. It now is the status quo fiat banking system. Make no mistake, any liberty enhancing elements of it are completely dead. Maybe it was just maybe the whole thing was just let's let people run a demo on a digital currency so we can learn from it and implement our own by central banks. Who knows? But I don't see that as a win for freedom, even though I think it could be a near-term asset that makes a lot of money. BCH is where I'm the most frustrated, because you do have Amari out of the way and this idea of this tax and all this other bullshit. And you have Roger Ver and Bitcoin.com with all the 2 million wallets and all this stuff. And yet here you have BSV with crazy people who made it happen at nChain and whatever. But the protocol is just manifestly better in so many ways, such that people trying to create things like Twetch, micropayments, apps, they can't build it on BCH. I'm sorry, they just can't. Not only does it not do some of the things with some of the codes, op returns, the fees are higher, and that matters when they're hundreds of a penny difference when you get into things like massive quantities of micropayments, whatever. Think about, let's say you wanted to. Let's say Roger Ver had a conversation with the guys from Twetch and they said, we want you to be able to sign into Twetch from your bitcom.coin wallet using BCH, and we want people to be able to use it on the BCH chain. Well, you need to make some changes. First, you'd need Paymail. You need to make some other changes. Who's going to make those changes happen? You know what's going to happen in BCH? Someone will mention, hey, let's make the following changes to the protocol so we can do all these cool things. And immediately, a bunch of basement dwelling losers will be like, Roger Ver's trying to take over. They're trying to emulate BSV. And that's Craig Wright. And I have no faith that any of those changes that make it better to build on will happen. I wish they would. I literally wish, I tweeted this and I really wish this would happen. I literally wish BCH would just replace their protocol with the BSV protocol exactly. And then all the people on BSV would just come and build on BCH, because you got the ticker and the network effect. You got Roger and 2 million wallets already downloaded, which access to all kinds of users to let them try out these apps. You have the ability, Roger can get in the room with people, can go on CNBC. Like, it's the number two. And when the conversations happen during a bull run about Bitcoin, there's always whoa, these fees are high among newbies. And then, well, this guy says that there's another version of Bitcoin with low fees. And that's always going to be Bitcoin Cash because they were second. And BSV is going to be a long 10th or whatever it is. So like, that's where my frustration is. I see these possibilities, but I don't have confidence in any of these forks to
And
get
anytime I
right.
suggest to BCH people that BSV has something interesting going on, it's like, you're obviously a paid BSV shill, you know, and like the other day, I think I showed you guys that screenshot where I just said that, you know, I'd like to see a version of Money Button on BCH. And the responses were either that I'm a paid shill, or they linked to something called Pay Button, which is, and they're like, see, this is a better version of Money Button. It's literally nothing like Money Button. You can't sign in. There's no app authentication. It's literally a button that you click and a QR code pops up on the screen. It's just a little bit of JavaScript hiding a QR screenshot. And it doesn't even change the address. Like, if you go into the source code, it's a single address. All you do is press a button and the JavaScript initiates a pop-up. And like, that's cool. Like, there's some uses for that, but it's nothing like Money Button. And meanwhile, they're saying, you know, oh yeah, Money Button's terrible. You know, it's not secure. It's this or that. It's like, Money Button's tremendously useful. It's
Now,
incredibly useful.
With Money Button, though, that doesn't require any protocol changes. So some of the BSV superior network that they have built is, I think it revolves around Money Button and the idea of Paymail, and that doesn't require any protocol changes. So I think if there was just some entrepreneur to do it on BCH, I think they could do it. And whether or not there are basement dwellers saying it's insecure or whatever, that doesn't really matter because it wouldn't cause a protocol change.
Well, I think what matters is people like to build in a community of people that are open to these things. Like,
That's legit. And
we
BSV
shouldn't underestimate the social forces that just push people away. Like, and you look at like Amory and how many people they pushed out of BCH. And we know several of them who basically just left entirely because, for no other reason than they were basically bullied by Amory. And we looked in BTC in the early days too. Like, there are seemingly a lot of the reasons the companies didn't take stronger actions in order to push a block size increase is basically that they got bullied. CEOs got like harassed on Twitter and decided to stop talking about it. And so I think that that's a powerful force, probably even more powerful than anything else. Ultimately, I mean, it's humans in charge, and it's humans who are going to make the decisions. And you know, we're not all you know, autistic code monkeys. It's people make emotional decisions all the time.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about the proposition that really what we're in is a narrative war, and it has almost no connection with the underlying technicals? And if we're in a narrative war, then BSV has sort of burned up its narrative. It had a little window. The people in BSV made their narrative about Craig, which was just if you've got to create a narrative, man, that's not the right way to go. The guy's not delivering any credibility that he is part of the Satoshi Nakamoto team. And so,
well, so I mean, to push back a little bit against that, the one thing that they've done right is the protocol thing. I mean, for whatever reason, they're the only people who have gotten the protocol to the point where.
Does that matter though? I'm saying if we're in a narrative
well, what I'm
battle,
saying is it could matter from a narrative perspective, but this goes back to what we were talking about on Voxer the other day that TK mentioned, is like, they never talk about all of that stuff. Like, they don't even make that part of their narrative. Instead of saying, for example, hey, look at what we've done by removing these block size limits. No one said this was possible. Look at what we've done by removing these chains way faster than everybody else said was possible. That's not the narrative they've decided to go. The narrative is that Craig's sue everybody and, you know, take down pedophiles and everyone's a secret pedophile. Everyone in cryptos are all secret pedophiles and criminals, and Craig's going to destroy them all with lawsuits, basically.
So they could have a narrative. I agree. I think they could have an excellent narrative, but I think they've just put their chips. They've made it revolve around Craig, and that was a big blunder.
Imagine the difference of, like, let's say the Kim.com interaction. You see that go up, and if the response is from CoinGeek or Craig or Kelvin or whatever, whoa, this is really awesome. Love to see this kind of stuff, things moving in this direction. Check out Bitcoin files. Actually, on BSV, I'd love to talk. You could actually not only have the payments, but all the content could be hosted on the blockchain too. There's some pros and cons to that, but let's chat. Didn't know if you knew BSV could do this, right? Versus, you're violating a patent, we're going to sue you. Like,
and then
the difference.
And the epic response of Kim.com saying, yeah, we checked out your patents. They're not relevant. Oh, the kill shot.
So speaking of Kim, by the way, I didn't mean to say that it's like, I don't know, like, what, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes with that kind of stuff that I don't want to get into on the call, but maybe we'll talk about later off this video. But like, I'm much more optimistic than you are, Isaac. I mean, I wouldn't judge it just off like that website that's outdated, that had stuff about integrating Lightning and Liquid, which is no longer necessarily accurate. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on that's been being built that I'm much more optimistic about it.
I sort of feel the same way as I did last year. Just give me the one legitimate business that is using big block Bitcoin in the way it was supposed to be used, and have that big block Bitcoin create value for the company using it, so they want to keep using it, and it's not a PR thing. And I feel like, well, that's the one spark that either of these chains need, is just that one real use case. And maybe it'll be Kim.com, I don't know. But I don't really see it in BCH. You have it incorporated in Coinbase and you have it used for payments, small scale, okay. But like something like integrating the payments with the data, not in the way that BSV is doing it, but maybe in the way that Kim.com is doing it. I feel like that really could be the one spark that gets the ball rolling.
TK,
Yeah, I think
narrative. Go ahead.
I think BSV is best set up to make that happen, but there is that marketing PR problem. I think if you listen to the talk about a year ago, it sounded like there might be a lot of connections. There are lots of announcements made about trips taken, people talking to, but nothing's been delivered on that front. And so I'm starting to think, all right, I think BSV leadership, if I can speak that way, is in the same place that everyone else in crypto is. They don't know how to get the world to be interested in this, because no deal has actually been closed towards that end. And then the one deal that was being celebrated towards the end of the year with the island, that, to my understanding, that wasn't a lead that was generated by InChain, CoinGeek, or any of those people. That was a lead generated by George. And I think that was an interesting deal, and shout out to George for making that happen. But I think that move by George is actually what the future of BSV depends on. I think BSV actually needs, we're not going to get Roger Ver, I just don't think that's happening, but BSV needs more personalities who have the business sense, who have the PR marketing sense, and who can actually get credible people to sit down and talk with them. Because what happens now is when anybody major player gets interested in BSV, they just Google it, or everybody on the internet says,
Exactly.
let me protect you from this scam, and they just buy into the narrative. And you need somebody that can overcome that.
You know
Or
what?
who like isn't online or something, because I feel like you got to have some real stones to stand up to the Twitter mob when they come after you and share all these links saying Craig is a scammer, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've lost all credibility by incorporating this coin. That's not easy to do.
Maybe that's why Tuvalu is perfect, because they have a week-long delay when their internet hits the rest of the. No, listen, this Tuvalu thing. That's actually cool. That's actually a really cool use case thing, right? But we're not, that option of just thinking it's cool and a potentially interesting proof of concept is not available to us because of the narrative that's been spun ahead of time. This is like Lonzo Ball having a respectable double-double 2 games in a row and winning one of those games. That's not cool because his dad has gone on for a year making grandiose claims that he's going to take him to the finals, right? Like, so because of all the huge claims, this is actually a neat thing. This would be cool for any cryptocurrency to get a sovereign state, even if it's 11,000 people on a very small island, to say, hey, we're going to use this for all of our records and all this stuff. That's kind of neat. That's kind of cool. But like, it's boring now because of all the bluster, you know?
And it seems like this massive compromise. Like you've been promising that you're going to have, you're going to be throwing people in jail. Governments all around the world are going to be like, oh my gosh, Craig is actually Satoshi. Oh, look at all this criminal activity. And then the thing you deliver that somebody else delivers on that you take credit for is a little tiny island nation that said, okay, yeah, well, we'll experiment and see if maybe it works. You know,
yeah,
it's
I saw
like
that post by Craig, and it seemed kind of sad where there was that post in Slack channel to his sycophants, which as I've said, at least, like what kind of person, you can judge someone to some extent by the people they keep company with. And you have a guy who claims to be a super genius hanging out in the chat room with like morons. What does that tell you? But he had the post that said something like, he was saying something like they got X, like we got a country. And I was like, oh, okay. Like that just seems so sad, because it's like you're bragging about a unknown island.
Oh, it was
nation.
PayPal. It was PayPal.
Yeah.
They got PayPal. No big deal. We got a sovereign nation. Well, how many people use PayPal, and how many people live in Tuvalu?
PayPal will be a much bigger on-ramp to Bitcoin, even if it's not our ideal, even if it, in many ways it's like a regression. Talking about an island nation that has, less people than like a small county in the US. I mean, it's like 11,000 people. It's like tiny.
I think part of
And
the
even then, and also don't celebrate like you just won the NBA Finals
right.
when you only have clinched a playoff berth, right? You don't, like that's big talk to be like, we got a country. Wait, have you? You have an announcement. You have an announcement that they seem to currently be willing to stand by. But per my earlier comments, this ain't even the most exciting announcement you've had. You've had more exciting announcements than this that haven't been delivered on. So don't celebrate like you won the finals. It's interesting. It's cool. Let's see what happens. But for all I know, that might not even be a thing that materializes. I wouldn't
Right.
I wouldn't hang my hat on it.
Yeah, it's like EHR. That when they said we're not going to be putting the files on chain, we're going to be putting the hashes of the files. That's essentially that takes away 90%. That's essentially saying, okay, we're not doing the MetaNet thing. We're doing something that we could do on BCH. There's literally no, you could do that on BTC, hell, if you wanted to. It would just be a little bit more expensive. Like you could just put it's a tiny little string of data into the out return. That's nothing to be excited about.
So this is why, this is kind of how I feel about the K.im, the Kim.com thing. It reminds me of the BSV approach to making a big announcement. And then you go dig a little bit and you're like, what the hell is this? Does it even make sense? Is this going to come about? And I don't want to ever rip on another entrepreneur or say your idea is stupid, your startup's going to fail. I'm not trying to play that game at all. I hope it succeeds. I think it's awesome that it's
Right.
going forward. I'm simply saying if I'm going to assess the impact to BCH, even if the website's outdated, the fact that it's still outdated and it's still live, when I go to it, it's like, this is a project that's been going since 2016. It's 4 years in. It has a white paper, which is a huge red flag to me. A startup that starts with a white paper feels like it was created on a whiteboard with a bunch of nerds who already made a bunch of money elsewhere and are like, let's disrupt the next industry. And that just doesn't usually succeed. Front and center on the page are names of prominent board members, legal counsel, people's brand who are just like, look, respectable person, which screams to me, you're paying way too much money to too many people. You're spending time on legal stuff, 4 years in exploring the Lightning Network as a possible, like all the things that if I was a VC, I would say, I don't think that's the consumer app that's going to take off versus the one that's a couple hackers in their basement tinkering around and, they've got something that's not polished, right? Like, I'm like, I mean, when you go out, you create a Dropbox and then you potentially in the future can pay with BCH. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that's big, but I'm like, I'll get excited about it when I actually see people using it and it increasing the transactions. Look at the number of transactions on BCH. They're like non-existent. So like, show me that, then I'll get excited. I'm not willing to get excited over announcements because everybody has announcements in crypto and they're almost always bullshit.
One of the things that it'll do, even if the actual product doesn't deliver, is that it's going to offer cover to other entrepreneurs who want to try to use Big Block Bitcoin. And if
so
you
that
have
they don't get, what was that guy, Draper? They don't get drapered.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like in BSV, there's no cover pretty much. You got to be a radical, independent entrepreneur to be building something on BSV and withstand the type of hatred and criticism that you're going to get online. If you're not somebody with that psychology, you got to say, hey, look, this is the respectable Big Block Bitcoin. I'm respectable, guys. Look, Kim.com's using it. It's integrated into Coinbase.
Is he respectable?
Well,
like I love him from
in
what
the
I know
dev
about
community.
him.
I would say, yeah.
Kim gets in the room with some really big players.
Okay.
Kim may have like, Kim's one of those guys who, is like definitely on, definitely controversial and contrarian. And there'll be a lot of people who hate on him, but there'll be a lot of people who are mainstream finance guys who will be excited about talking to Kim and look at Kim and say, hey, like, I mean, as far as I can tell about the guy's pretty awesome. I don't know his whole backstory, but he seemed to me from my interactions with him, and he's a great guy. He seems like a great guy.
What I do know about him, which is from a few articles years ago, he's my kind of rebel. Fascinating.
Yes.
Well,
and I think,
and let's remember before you dog on him too much, Isaac.
I'm not dogging on him. I'm not dogging on him. I'm just saying the project itself just doesn't have the signs of something that I see having momentum. It feels like it has backwards momentum. Like it's been 4 years, whatever. Like, and again, people who made a ton of money on something else years ago almost never have the hunger to do a consumer app and do it again in the same way. Sometimes they do, but I'm just purely objective. I have nothing against him or the project. It just doesn't make me feel like I'm confident right now.
and on the point of respectability, I think among dev types who are going to be interested in blockchain technology and building apps, I think Kim would have a very high approval rating.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You mean
Derek,
there
what were
won't
you-
be
what
like
were you gonna say?
1,000 people?
I was just going to say, I mean,
with
Kim has an
BSV?
actual track record of success. I mean, I understand your point about the hunger and everything else, but like, what else do you go on? Like, because you can make the case like, yes, like guys who have been very successful in the past don't necessarily have the hunger to do something else afterwards. I mean, I get that.
But you have counters to that, like Ev Williams, who founded Twitter.
Well, on the
maybe,
other hand, it's like what's the other standard by which you judge these things?
Right.
Because then you're in a situation where you're saying, well, what about guys who haven't had success?
Yeah.
You know, like at the end of the day, like a guy who's had success, you know, this is a guy who not only has had success, that's an understatement. Like Mega Upload was like 4% of internet traffic at its height. Like it was massive.
I guess to me, it feels like I've seen a pattern with consumer apps, especially where if the first time you hear about it, it's because you hear the fifth or sixth or seventh person on Twitter mentioning it, like Clubhouse, right? Like Substack, like Slack, right? When I finally started using these apps, and Slack isn't consumer, but it was because it just was happening with more and more frequency that people who were using it were talking about it. And I was like, what is this thing? When the first time you hear about it, it's a big announcement. And then 6 months later, another announcement that progress has been made. And then 3 months later, another announcement. And you've never heard it come from the people who are using it. And it's slowly building a user base. It just almost is never the case that those types of consumer apps succeed. Yeah,
I'm seeing this now with Filecoin, the IPFS thing. So like I'm on this I'm trying to do this thing where I'm integrating podcasts in the blockchain, and I'm looking for the best, like the objectively best mechanism for decentralized storage. And naturally BSV comes up, but I'm seeing if there are cheaper options. If I can reduce cost to the consumer tenfold, that's great. And so it's not actually a big market of people that are trying to have decentralized storage, like permanent storage in particular. IPFS is this technology, which is really cool storage technology. The people who created it created a new coin called Filecoin, and it got massive hype, unbelievable. It might have raised the most money. I don't know. It's like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, best engineers from all over the place, all these prominent announcements. And finally they go live, and I'm like, okay, this looks like a plausible candidate for what I would want. You dive into details, and it's massively over-engineered. It's very clear this is not something that was like an organic. This did not come up from a visionary saying, this is what the end product needs to look like. This is how we're going to get there. This came from getting the engineers together in the room and saying, okay, we're going to make an awesome technology. And it's not even permanent storage. It's like, it's so over-engineered. You have to have these short-term contracts with people who are storing your data, and then you have to have another contract with them to retrieve the data, and it's all temporary. You have to manage it. It's a pain in the ass. It'd be so much easier just to put the data on something like BSV, have a one-time fee, even if it's more expensive, and you don't have to screw around with it. So I feel like that's exactly what you're talking about. When it's the official thing that all the smart people are doing, it's probably not going to be a great product.
Well, at least he's not doing an ICO, because like that's just like seems to be a terrible model.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get away with that anymore.
Not
Unfortunately.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still ICOs, but the amount of money raised on ICOs has dropped precipitously.
I'm curious about this pump right now, led by BTC. What do you guys think? Why is it happening? How long is it going to go? I'm curious. Is this just all a good thing across the board? Are you worried about Tether or unsustainable things or pump and dump or whatever? What are your thoughts?
Always worried about Tether, man. There's so much smoke around that project, and I think it's net going to be good. I think the more money that sits in crypto is probably a good thing. I think it's very plausible that over time the BTC gains are going to die out, and people are going to be looking to the altcoins to make what crypto gains used to be. You know, make their 10x, make their 50x. So I think that's a good thing. I'm worried about what happens once this pops. I mean, that's always the scary part. I think it plausibly could, we could still have another doubling or more left in this run. But man, when that bubble pops, it's going to be ugly, and the altcoins are going to be smashed again. Like and the thing with these cycles is, you could have an 80% drop, no problem. Like BTC go to up to, I don't know, 80K, and then it drops, 80% over a period of a few months, and it's like, oh, okay, now crypto's dead for another 3 years, and that's never fun.
Yeah, that might be what happens. My alternative possibility, which is just, I really don't know what's going to happen, is that a lot of this is to do with just having the more institutional money coming in, and FOMO, basically. So, I mean, you can look at the exchange, the data on exchanges, and it does look like we're reaching sort of a liquidity crunch where there's all-time lows of Bitcoin actually available in circulation to buy. Whether that stays that way, or whether people start like seeking profit, or whether this is, I don't know. I mean,
my gut take, and I'm not like super into investing or whatever, is that this doesn't have very much at all to do with Bitcoin itself or any cryptos, or institutional people or new people suddenly learning what Bitcoin is and realizing this is the future of store of value or of money or whatever. If you are familiar with the venture capital industry right now, the real estate industry right now, the stock market right now, pumping like crazy. People they're buying up land sight unseen in other states and other cities like crazy, just as a store of value, because the dollar is getting created like crazy. People are just looking for places like never before. VCs are emailing me, hey, you want to you raising money? No, not raising money. Don't need to raise money for probably a couple of years, if ever again. Are you sure? They're desperate for places to put money. Real estate investors, desperate for places to put money. I mean, people are doing crazy things. Bitcoin and crypto actually took a while. This was going on for several months before this pump happened in real estate and in the stock. Look at the stock market. It makes no sense whatsoever, with the exception of the companies who are benefiting from the closure of all their competitors, like Uber Eats and all that shit. It makes no sense. Money is desperate to find an outlet. It's almost entirely inflation. Yes, that brings a little bit more people getting educated and getting interested on other grounds, but I think it's largely just, okay, I need places to put this freaking money. I'm going to put some in stocks, some in startups, some in real estate, some in crypto, some in gold. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
That's a really interesting theory, because that's sort of the scenario that a lot of Bitcoiners and hard money people have been theorizing about for a long period of time, that at some point, whenever that inflation ball rolls, it's going to be nasty. Especially, this was all pre-COVID and pre the latest inflationary policies from the Fed. So if that's the case, oh shit, I don't know what we're on the beginnings of, because inflation was going to be a problem 5 years ago. But now, if we're actually having money flee the dollar into things like crypto, we might see the indefinite bull run.
It's like, show me anything exciting with energy. Oh, Elon Musk, he's exciting. He has energy.
Yeah.
Tesla stock is like even more than Bitcoin, right? Like, I just want to put my money somewhere because I don't want it to sit in a bank or in some bond or something, TK, you get to pick the next topic. You look you look like you're part of the witness protection program with the black hat and the black shirt and everything.
I'm reporting you guys right now, like, to law officials, everything you're saying about BSV. No, man, I like your theory. I think it makes a lot of sense. One thing I would say in response to this idea that this is going to be some heyday for BSV, one of the reasons why I'm so hard on these undelivered promises is because I think it's important for people to not get too easily excited about a victory when there's a lot of work left to be done. And so something that you hear a lot of now is, oh, if BTC drops, and once people see how much of a Ponzi this is, then that's going to be a win for BSV. And usually when people get wrecked and when they look stupid in the process and find out that they're wrong, they're not eager to find out, oh, well, what was the correct crypto that I could have put my money in? when people get wrecked and embarrassed, their skepticism increases. And if you come to them saying, hey, look, the reason you got wrecked is because the real original Bitcoin over here was the true store of value, they're going to go, no, I'm way more skeptical about anything, even the truth, than I was before, because I got burned by a pitch that sounded just like that. So I'm not of the persuasion that it's going to be good for BSV in the short to midterm if BTC drops. I think it's going to make a lot of people look at crypto in general as this big scammy thing, and there's going to be a major PR battle to win that trust back. And BSV does not look well positioned to win any PR battles right now, major or minor.
Well, if BTC dropped too, I mean, significant. Let's say BTC dropped 80%. BSV is going to drop like 200%. I mean, like so BTC, you know, like gonna go like negative, like you're at the point like
They're
BTC will
gonna
truly
come repo my house just
yeah,
to cover
like
the BSV that I own.
and obviously that's an exaggeration, but like BSV will truly go down a tremendous amount of money. Like it's not going to be some situation where BTC is killed by Craig's lawsuit and BSV pumps to $1 gajillion. Like that's not going to happen.
And suppose you could make the case that that it appears to be uncoupled right now, because the people that are in BSV are kind of like the fundamentals, so that maybe those people don't move. So that's possible.
I think that's fair. Because I think a lot of the more speculative investors, or the more, I don't know, more mindful or something investors will have already been scared out of the BSV market. But do you see, TK, like, is there any life? Well, I'm just going to use your analogy, okay? The best analogy of the person going to the gym. Like before, it was BCH was a strong person, and then he stopped going to the gym and got fat, and then BSV was the guy in the gym getting strong. Do you see there's progress in BSV? Right now, I haven't been super involved and paying attention. Seems like there's just regression and stagnation. Is there any life other than the Twitch people?
Here's the analogy I'll use to illustrate the power of framing. Let's say I walked up to you randomly and I was like, hey, Steve, I really appreciate just the guy that you are. I want to give you this $100, man, just as a token of my appreciation. How would you feel about that?
I would accept. You have my PayMail, right?
Now, let's switch it up. Let's say that I owe you $200 because it's money that I borrowed from you last year. And then I come up to you and I say, hey, Steve, I just want to give you a token of appreciation, man. Here's $100. How are you going to feel?
I'd be like, you prick, you got another $100 to make up.
Yeah. In both situations, I gave you the same amount of money, but one of them caused you to be really impressed with me, and the other caused you to be confused and kind of annoyed with me. And it's all about the framing, right? Because in one scenario, you expected more. In another scenario, you didn't expect anything. I think BSV is the guy that goes to the gym and works out every day and gets a lot done, but who also brags about the marathon that he's going to run next week and never does that. And it's so easy because of this guy's own words for people to focus on that and overlook the actual achievements. So as an example, based on what Derek said earlier, think about whenever we've heard from Craig, at least in terms of promises and predictions, not in terms of like the interviews that he does with Ryan X. Charles that are more about philosophy, but whenever he makes promises and predictions, we see these little private Slack messages, right? And it's stuff like 2021 is the year. And it's always like some threat or something like that just doesn't happen. Imagine if he didn't do any of that. And he did the stuff that Shatters does, which is really interesting to me because all the great announcements always come from Shatters. It's almost like Craig doesn't even announce them. It feels like he's not even impressed with them. Imagine if Craig only limited himself to the announcements that Shatters makes. We would be looking at him right now or the broader world, as the only dude that's actually delivering. Because when it comes to the protocol, BSV is absolutely killing it. They do what they say they're going to do. Yeah, sometimes there may be like delays in development, but they always show up and deliver and make progress. It's just that's not when you really hear from Craig and Calvin. You hear from them every day about all this other stuff, and that's what gets the attention. So I think in terms of protocol development, B is doing really well. I still love the fact that it's a playground for experimentation, even though all projects built on it aren't good, because that's a useful signal. But I think the biggest problem in BSV is the narrative. It remains the case that anyone who considers adopting BSV is going to have to be this inordinately courageous person who's willing to be persecuted and have their job threatened just to support it publicly. And that is a problem.
This seems like an interesting position to be in, because I think for a while BSV had a lot, it even had narrative momentum. It had a lot of momentum going for it. And then I think it's failed to deliver outside of some of the cool companies, Streamanity and Twitch, that have come around in the past year or whatever. Those are legit. That's life. But I haven't seen anything else more than that outside of the protocol. It's kind of a weird position to be in, though, because what I like about BSV, the BSV culture, is it's very entrepreneurial. It's very build centric. But now it almost sounds like the case is, hey, look, we have a better technical protocol, but we've set an environment in which unless you have big cojones, you're not going to be, your entrepreneurship is not going to be appreciated by the broader world, but our tech is better. To me, that seems like, well, that's kind of a weak pitch now to say, hey, we have and even the superiority of the protocol is not something that's probably going to be particularly relevant for most use cases, because BCH, by contrast, can do pretty much anything BSV can do. Now, in the future, if you have a massively successful project, yeah, BCH can't scale right now like BSV can, but that's very abstract and distant. So it's like, is the BSV pitch a technical pitch at this point?
So here's my theory on why so many people talk about law. Are there a bunch of statists and authoritarians in BSV? It certainly seems so. I think there are. But I think the reason people talk mostly about law is really this. People know that at the end of the day, if they go over to the brothers in Ethereum and say, hey, come over here and build on that, the reaction is going to be predictable, right? People are going to be like, oh, that's a scam. It's Craig Wright. It's all this kind of stuff. And they're experiencing no success with proselytizing, getting people to come over.
Right.
And so there's kind of this hope that, well, maybe law will eliminate all the competition and people will be forced to use BSV because that's all that's left. And so there's kind of like this hope, and I think it's a rather naive hope, that all the exchange owners, that all the altcoin leaders and developers, all the entrepreneurs, everybody's going to end up in jail. All these coins are going to be destroyed, and there's only going to be one law-abiding blockchain remaining. And then even though everyone still hates Craig, even though they still mistrust Calvin, oh, they really need it, and they'll have to come over, which is why I think instead of saying to Kim.com, hey, man, come build that over at BSV, there's kind of like this attitude of like, hey, you're violating one of our patents. And I think that too is naive, but I think that's what a lot of people are hoping for.
I'm just reading this tweet by Calvin that says, it's just last night, I think. We are not playing the pump and dump game as exchanges will dump on us. We are waiting for stronger BSV exchanges to emerge this year. Then we will expose ourselves.
That's his way of saying, hey, everybody else is pumping more than us, but don't worry, it's all part of the plan.
Trust the plan.
Trust the plan. In terms of energy and stuff, it's a very small number that I'm familiar with, but a very high caliber. So like the Matterpool people are pretty interesting, and they're actually working and they're actually building. The Twetch people, Jack Liu and his team, which have RelayX and Streamanity, and even Dimely. There's been a lot of things sort of proof of concept, like prototypes, like Dimely, right? Like no one's really using it, but the fact that it literally works today to do this like automated video calls where you're being charged by the minute in cents or fractions of a like.
Yeah, that was 6
really
months
cool.
ago, right? That was still in the window of momentum where BSV.
And they haven't. And here's what I'm saying. All of those work, and they work incredibly well, and they're really cool. None of them have blown up for one reason that may or may not ever be surmountable, and that's KYC. You just can't, because the whole world, it's too late. They view all cryptos as just an investment vehicle. They're regulated and treated as an investment vehicle. So the idea of building consumer apps with micropayments where the only reason you need crypto is to use it to spend a few cents on a video or a tweet, none of that stuff, it's either not legal or it's gray area, and companies like Stripe and whatever are not willing to take that risk. So that means you can't appeal to anyone except for people who already love BSV with those apps. And that is a problem. And so like RelayX has a card coming out, a Visa card, which is really cool. Actually, they negotiated a deal with Visa, and it's going to allow like in like 50 different currencies. So you can spend with a Visa card, and it'll come right out of your RelayX wallet, the BSV, and you can spend on dollars or whatever you want. That's really awesome. It solves one side of the equation, but the spending BSV on real world goods side is not really the side that's going to drive the usage. It's using BSV, spending it or earning it on apps that are only possible because of BSV, which is like micropayments, instant splits of revenue among 10 people, data going on chain and decentralized. These things are incredible, and no tech that I have yet discovered can do them except BSV, but you can't get a normie. That's why we get 100 to 150 views max on our videos on Streamanity, because there's not enough people when we would get 5,000 on YouTube. Even if it was, you know, oh, well, they won't pay the price. Even if we put it at 1 penny, we'd still get a couple hundred on Streamanity, because you can't go on and click pay to watch this video. And then it's like, where's your BSV? I got to go set up a wallet. How are you going to fill your wallet? I don't freaking know. All the places I can buy BSV are like scary, ridiculous. I got to upload a passport. Half the time it doesn't work. It's a joke. It's like, so the consumer app use case to me is the most exciting and the one that people have built real things today that are utterly revolutionary and could change the whole internet of content creation and consumption. But the consumers can't use them because of law specifically. And I don't know if that's surmountable. And if it's surmountable, it's certainly not going to be anyone in BSV that gets those laws changed or has the courage to just ignore them.
No, the type of people that are going to surmount that problem are the Roger Veres of the world, who have a particular ideology about their relationship with the state and who are willing to kind of push the envelope.
He'll either surmount it, move around it, or go to jail for it, right? And I think you need to have that attitude.
Yeah, and like what they did with local.bitcoin.com, right? That this was clever innovation where they're not breaking laws, but they made it non-custodial in such a way where they're essentially avoiding a bunch of the regulations in a legal way. You know,
that's the same with SideShift AI.
Yeah.
And now, actually, I don't know if you saw the announcement from Eric Voorhees today, but Shapeshift is going no KYC again.
Oh, fantastic.
They've restructured their business. They're now, it's huge. It's one of the biggest announcements in a long time.
And guess what? Guess what? That's a great place, no KYC, to exchange with crypto. Guess what? They don't use SV because they hate Craig Wright.
Exactly. And would the people, would the minds in SV even want that? Would they want the KYC free world, or would they say, no, it's better for us to have KYC because that's compliant with the law? You know, like other than maybe a couple of people who are the entrepreneurs in BSV, in that culture, would you say there would be it seems to be a preference and eagerness for compliance to KYC?
All of the NPCs in BSV, which are, you know, maybe the majority of people tweeting about it, love KYC. The actual people who are building are almost all completely free market radicals who would not like it, which is a weird dichotomy to have the builders building actual apps be radical free market people, much more in line ideologically with Roger Ver and BCH. The people who are the loudest organizations being law and, you know, N-chain people, and all the normie followers are also law, you know, whatever people. It's a very weird mix.
Yeah, it's like I remember watching an interview with Craig where he's talking about, he's like thrilled to talk about how if he spent more than $5,000 in a certain window of time at a restaurant, well, then he should be filling out KYC documents at the restaurant. And that restaurant must be legally compliant.
You know, like, KYC was like, you know, as we know it today, it was invented as a part of the shitty Patriot Act, just as a mass surveillance technique where all of the cost is put on businesses. Instead of the FBI and all these people doing their damn job and trying to track down money of, they're like, we're going to make all businesses just do it for every single person all the time. And then we'll have this treasure trove of like, this is not some integral thing to the security of the world. This is some horrid bullshit that's caused untold harm. But if the Bitcoin Association, for example, literally their only job was to convince a carve out to say KYC doesn't apply at all to consumer apps where you're spending small amounts of money. Technically, it's like under $200 you can't, but it's all gray, and companies like Stripe, like all the payment processors, are afraid to use it. And if you could convince one of them or convince some regulators to say, yeah, that's cool. This is totally different. You can't launder money efficiently by 5 cents a twetch. And you can onboard people with a credit card all day long. That would be the most productive thing they could possibly do.
Hey, so I wrote this about BSV today on Reddit because someone asked the difference between BCH and BSV, and I tried to give an honest answer. So I talked about the pros and cons, but this little excerpt is
And you were
relevant. I
labeled
said,
a shill by both sides.
I'm sure, yeah. No, I think so, yeah. I gotta go read the comments, but I'm sure both sides hate me. I said, the way I feel about this whole situation in BSV is that it's a combination between Galt Gulch with a few legit builders and a crypto North Korea ruled by a cartoonish strongman where everyone is scared of speaking their own minds, getting sued or attacked by street mobs, enforcing the rule of the great leader. And that's basically how I feel. It's like there are some really great people, and then there's like this kind of like scary, weird element where you're like, am I allowed to say this?
Let's talk about, because we mentioned KYC and all this stuff. Let's talk about privacy. I think something that no one is really talking about in BTC as this bull run's happening. BCH is kind of even more radical in their let's keep the freedom alive thing. BSV seems to embrace the state and think that if you just shine light on the world, that I think it's underappreciated the extent to which the invention of Bitcoin, and certainly where it's going right now, might actually be a massive, massive step backward for personal liberty. Whether that was the intention or whether it was hijacked accidentally or whether it was an inevitable accidental outcome, I don't know, but this is a very real possibility. The idea of a panopticoin, as I think Steve coined the phrase in several episodes ago, the idea that everything you do is all connected in one unified grid, right? We're like, okay, now we're already talking, and we already have on all of our cell phones track and trace technology that may or may not work or be enabled, but it's there to say whether you were around another person who was around another person who tested positive for COVID, for example, and you can be denied entry and access to things based on that. You've got this sort of grid, and now all of your financial exchanges can also be, everything's moving to the cloud and it's all interchangeable and connectable. And I don't care if it's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, USDC, or something we have yet to see. So far, all of them can do this. They're public ledgers. They can absolutely tie everything back to you without that much difficulty. Monero and Zcash might make it more difficult, but still doable to someone really motivated. But a world of hyper Bitcoinization might be a dystopian hellhole. And no one talks about that possibility. What do you think?
Well, especially with KYC, I mean, you talked about like, I mean, if you're with KYC and with the fact that industry standards don't exist really for maybe mitigating some of that risk, you're in a situation now where most people are buying their Bitcoin on exchanges. So they're doxing themselves right there. Most people don't have good privacy practices. Most wallets don't have good built-in privacy practices. People spending it are spending it on KYC websites. So, you're at a point now where a large number of Bitcoin have already been basically made trackable and traceable. And it's pretty dangerous. I mean, both from the perspective of the state, but also now you start looking into, massive data hacks where people have doxed themselves on their exchanges. And now it's not just the state, it's like blackmailers on the internet and selling information that reveals all your financial holdings, that reveals
personal address.
Yeah, personal address. I mean, there's some shady stuff that could happen where we unite the dark beasts of both the underworld outside the state and the state. And it's really scary, I think.
I mean, the fact that people basically know how much money Satoshi has if he's still alive, he or she is still alive, and that they can basically estimate how much Bitcoin belongs to some of the other OGs in the space. That's kind of terrifying in and of itself, right? Let alone all of this kind of new stuff. And now you add on all the entry points and exit points that the mass users are going to gain are PayPal or Robinhood or whatever, where they're not really owning it. They're sort of buying shares in it. And all that stuff is totally regulatory compliant, KYC, all this kind of stuff. Like, I could see a world in which Bitcoin winning means Liberty losing.
Yeah, I'm less scared of Panopticoin on BTC because it's essentially just going to be custodial. So there's nothing like uniquely sinister about custodial BTC more than just going through PayPal for all of your transactions.
So it's
You know,
no
and
worse than the current banking system, but it's not really any better.
Right. Like BSV could be potentially more scary because then you're talking about like I feel like more control or more unique level of surveillance
Granularity.
with big block. Yeah. The granularity of it with big block Bitcoin is something that could truly be terrifying versus something like BTC. There are limitations that don't scare me as much. I also think like I've been thinking a lot more about this because there was a period of time where it was unclear whether BTC success was a net positive trade-off for freedom, because you could imagine, wow, we go to the BTC standard and then we're on the hard money standard. Yeah, maybe you give up some privacy to the state, but at least you are inflation proof. And now I just think there's a 0% chance of that happening. Like if you have BTC incorporated into the state and everything is custodial, there is no way that they're going to not have a fractional system. Like there is no reason, there'd be no technical reason whatsoever why you would have to actually move the Bitcoin on chain, or why your little credits that you get that are supposed to represent BTC or correspond one-to-one to them.
I'll put it this way. Until Bitcoin is declared illegal, I won't believe that it's a legitimate threat to the state. Like,
Yeah.
just like voting. If it was a
Yeah.
legitimate threat to the powers that be, it would be illegal, right? Like,
Yeah.
in a weird sort of way, right? Like there's a world in which maybe it goes too fast and it becomes universal too fast, and then it sort of can't be made illegal, but it's sort of, that maybe the way the internet has, but it can start to get nefarious elements and whatever. But like, I think we're well past that. And if the more that it's embraced and allowed by regulators, the more it's been deemed, yeah, this is not a threat to our absolute need to have the printing press. There is no war in modern history, maybe any of history, that would have been possible without the ability to inflate. You think war is the health of the state. It is the state. You think they're going to give up their ability to wage war because Bitcoin code is law?
Yeah, and this is like the ultimate autistic libertarian fallacy here. The idea that the technical specifications are going to restrain the state in a meaningful way when it's entirely custodial. They're like, no, you understand. Look at the protocol. With the protocol, you can't create new Bitcoin. Okay, kiddo, but now you have a custodial system, which means there's no technical reason, which is tying the tokens that you're issued to the tokens that are in the protocol. It's this absolutely elementary mistake. It reminds me of one of those.
Which may already be the case with Tether, by the way.
It could be. It reminds me of one of these internet comics where it's like the guy's trying to. It's like two nerds talking about how they're going to encrypt this important data. And they're like, oh man, I've used this algorithm that would take 1 million years to crack the password. It's so super secure. And then like at the next scene, it's some guy saying, hey, here's this $5 wrench, beat the guy over the head till he gives you the password. Like the same thing going on here.
I see it. I see what's probably going to happen is what's likely scenario is something like fee pressure pushes people towards custodial options. And just like people are just going to onboard on custodial options too and never move it. Like if people are onboarding with PayPal and these other services like that, they're probably never going to take their Bitcoin off of those services. So once that starts to happen, there's a lot more power the state has to clamp down and regulate. Because you can imagine if everyone's custodying their own Bitcoin, it's hard to enforce some of those rules. But if you're talking about a large number of Bitcoin users have all their Bitcoin stuck on exchanges and like suddenly you pass some regulations and it's like, hey, too late, right? And you just have to put, and the next step from there is fractional reserve.
Right. These people think like that. Okay, the blockchain is this amazing technology. You're not using the blockchain when you are going through a third party to use the blockchain for you. Like even if you have your coins, you own them yourself, but the fees are $1,000 to use, you're effectively not going to be using the blockchain still. And the coins that the effective coins, the PayPal tokens that are going to be traded are not going to, each transaction is not going to correspond to a blockchain transaction.
So let me make clear like that, that's the, hey, this is not some utopian libertarian outcome, especially if you're a maximalist, if you think we get to a world where Bitcoin, all the other altcoins die and Bitcoin is the world standard, whatever, the only way in which I see that happening is if Bitcoin is completely unthreatening to the state and, whatever. However, in a multi-coin world, this, I still think on net is a win for Liberty because it's optionality. Even if it's even if it's a short-term thing, even if the window closes a year from now, and we had 12 years where people got to use cryptocurrencies in a lot of different ways. During those 12 years, a lot of people got to gain a little bit more freedom because of their ability to use that. Silk Road, while it existed, people got to gain a little bit more freedom to buy marijuana or whatever before it closed down. And if they stick around, it's like more options on the whole. You're always in a game of cat and mouse with regulators and thugs. And it's never like we won once and for all because we wrote some code. You live in a ever fluctuating world, and the beliefs people hold, the powers that it's always changing, and the regulators are usually playing catch up. And so like, yes, more of it. I love it. Have the gray markets, have the privacy coins, have the mixers, have Bitcoin, have it gives more optionality. It is a win for freedom sort of on the whole. But I think this idea that like one single thing, one single coin is going to become the new world currency, and then all governments will basically just wither and die.
Ridiculous.
I don't think it's going to go down that way at all. And I'll throw in one more thing about that. That's scary in some other ways too. If you lived in Nashville on Christmas Day for the next 2 or 3 days, you had no cell phone service, no internet service, no direct TV service, no telephone service. And if all your money was in Bitcoin and you wanted to transact, you were fucked for an indefinite amount of time. So you want optionality. You want to have something like a cash or a smaller tradable asset. Maybe you want to have some gold. Maybe you want to have some Bitcoin. Maybe you want to have some in a custodial wallet that you can use for, whatever simple transactions. You want to have someone like, I think the options matter. I think looking at it as there's one thing, and if we achieve it, we'll be free forever, is a fool's errand. And it's more like, how can I position my life so that I'm always kind of one step ahead of the state in this ever shifting world? It's just like the internet. You can use it in a way that actually restricts your freedom or a way that enhances it, or a little bit of both.
So both sides of this suffer from an idiotic fallacy. You just described one of them, or idiotic idea, let's say, of the future. You described one of them on BTC. But I think BSVs is like equally stupid. The idea that governments are going to use a traceable currency for all of their financial activity so that individuals on the internet can audit them will never happen.
Man, I would really like to do this black budget program, but unfortunately I can't because our accounting system is on BSV and everyone will see
code
it.
is law. Oh,
Nobody is not going to happen. Even if governments were to adopt BSV as the official currency, they would not use it in such a way. They would find a way to do it where it's anonymous. That's
BCH
what governments
is the most
not just bad government, not just North Korea, like they say, North Korea benefits from anonymity. No, the United States government benefits from anonymity. Every single government around the world wants anonymity.
I think BCH has the most, that I've seen, realist approach about this, like just kind of understanding these things. That no, we're not just like completely indestructible because we have code, and no, we can't just comply with the law and have good things happen. They understand the dance of trying to evade and escape and be one step ahead of this stuff. TK, you've been quiet for too long. We're going to get accused of all kinds of horrible things.
Well, I don't want to assume that privacy as BSV allows is necessarily going to lead to some society in which everything that we do is traceable. I'm open to the possibility that there can be a creative way of using BSV such that it has a sufficient amount of privacy to give us all of the things we think we need anonymity for. And I actually crave more discussions and debates on that. The problem, however, is that it's almost impossible to get those discussions going, because whenever someone expresses concerns about anonymity, I see this happen to Derek all the time, they immediately get accused of just loving criminals and like, oh, okay, Derek, you can still do your drugs. And it's like, no, like, don't be naive here. The definition of a good government is a government that agrees with, is a government that's currently occupied by somebody who agrees with your concept of good. which means by definition that government is also going to be bad in some ways relative to your beliefs. And we should never underestimate a government's ability to criminalize something that was previously good. It happens all the time. And our government is no exception to that. So we shouldn't be naive, and we shouldn't advocate this view that, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't care about anonymity. No, like anonymity is a major concern, but can the privacy that BSV allows for give us that? I'm not convinced that it's not. I'm not convinced that BSV will just be like a mark of the beast type tool, but I think the concern is legitimate, and I think it needs to be answered and debated for sure.
Yeah, I'm not convinced it will either necessarily, but unless, I mean, what I am convinced is that if we enter a world where we have BSV integrating with VAT taxes and with KYC and stuff like that, that is a likely outcome. I don't think that there's anything inherent in the technology right now that requires that we necessarily enter that kind of world. I just think that there's a variety of different factors at play. It's not just the technology, not just what BSV can do. It's how it interacts with the world that will determine that. And I don't always
we shouldn't trump out the phrase within law as some sort of blanket immunization from these negative possibilities you're talking about.
Yeah, and I feel like the mark of the beast scenario is much more likely the tighter BSV in particular is integrated into the state. So for example, if using a cryptocurrency like Big Block Bitcoin were mandatory from the state, is that this will now be the official currency that you must use so that we can track you, that's scary shit. And I don't think that's beyond I don't think that's too unreasonable. It's not too crazy to imagine, especially a small state, especially like a small island nation, where they go, actually, this works out pretty well, and the price is appreciated. So the more we use it, like the wealthier we are, because now there's international money flying, coming in. Okay, everybody now uses this. Well, then you're talking about then you have the public transactions, and then you have your private transactions that you automatically, and then that makes you a criminal because you're not using the state money. Then you get into some scary territory, I think.
Maybe the bad reputation and bad people skills of some of the most vocal leaders in BSV is actually a benefit, because I can imagine them banging on the door of some regulator being like, please meet with us. We want to help you regulate the entire crypto market. And then being like, who is this crazy guy? We're not going to meet with him. Maybe that's actually.
I've heard, I can't say this with a high level of confidence, but I've heard that the Chinese government has done something similar in Africa, where they have kind of tried to spread their influence by giving African dictators technology to better surveil their people, and with some success. So it's like, hey, look, we want to invest in your country. You got some natural resources we like. And hey, here's this cool tracking technology, social credit score that we're already using to control 1 billion people. You might like it over here. So that, so the story goes, it's been effective. So at least that's possible to convince a state that way.
Derek, you're the resident archivist and historian of all things Bitcoin, and I thought this was funny that you dug up. I had actually forgotten about this. Maybe we've always been at war with Eurasia was starting to work on me, but the revisionist history. But it was only a couple of years ago when Craig was like, "We are working on stuff that will make chain analysis impossible. We will have mixers. We will have total privacy. This is the next thing. Jimmy won't let me announce it yet, but it's about to come out anytime."
He was also
he's
asked about anonymity.
Reversed course, and he's like, "Mixers are illegal. That stuff is terrible." How do you explain that?
Well, he was also asked about anonymity. The question that he responded to was hey, when are we getting anonymity on Bitcoin Cash? And this was December 2017. And he said, next year it's coming, but I can't talk more right now, And he specifically used the word anonymity. Not only that, I mean, for someone who claims to be Satoshi, if you go back to the Bitcoin white paper, anonymity is mentioned. If you go back to the original announcement on the cryptography mailing list, anonymity is mentioned. If you go back to the very first version of bitcoin.org, it says participants can be anonymous. If you go to Satoshi's writings, he talks about using Tor. There's a lot of discussion about anonymity early on. And I guess you can say that, if Craig were Satoshi, that he came to the conclusion that anonymity was bad, or he decided that what he was actually talking about was pseudonymity. But for someone who in a culture in BSV who harps on this thing about the distinction between anonymity and privacy, they seem very ahistorical in the fact that they pretend that this was always a distinction that was being made, and it's
Well,
clear that it wasn't.
maybe when Calvin met Craig in 2010, that was a different Craig than the Craig that he first met in 2015. Right? Two separate tweets saying he first met Craig in 2010 and one saying 2000. There could be two different Craigs walking this earth, and that could account for all of this. TK, as the resident justifier of Craig S. Wright, why do you think the change in tone and on so many things, since kind of before BSV and BCH split till after? And not just the change in tone, but the refusal to acknowledge any previous different ideas that he espoused.
So I think that latter question is the easier one to answer, and it might provide some insight in how to look at the first question. So Craig just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy, and I say this neutrally, not as any criticism, he just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to be apologizing to anybody about anything. I mean, I don't think we have a lot of those on the record, right? Craig has said he's going to do a lot of things in the past, changed his mind or perhaps been wrong about it, and doesn't really apologize to you for it. Did he come back and give an apology to all the BSV people that he made upset when he said something like it'd be $1,200 by the end of that year and it'd be like 98% chance that'd be the case? He doesn't. I didn't need an apology from him. I never took that prediction seriously. But did he apologize about it when he said he would sign and so forth? I know he said some things about it, but it's like he's just not the type of dude, as far as I'm concerned, to be apologizing to the world about changing his mind. And I think he is the type of person who would be most likely to appear contradictory because his mind could have changed about a lot of those things. And if he's not the type of guy to be like, I was wrong about this, or I changed my opinion on it, then what does that look like? Instead of looking like a guy that just evolved in his thinking, he looks like a guy that's completely inconsistent and contradicted himself. So you take away a person's tendency to apologize and they look like a contradictory person. That's one explanation. But I actually like the idea that we talked about in our earlier episodes, where I think he strategically employs the kind of language that he thinks he needs to employ for the sake of getting BSV adopted. Whether you agree with his philosophy of law or not, I genuinely believe that he thinks that is exactly how he needs to sound in order to make sure there isn't a big target on BSV's back. I think he's very afraid of law as being the biggest threat to this whole industry, and he's trying to protect BSV from that. That's what I think.
I think that's reasonable. And I think there has been a change. It seems to me there's been a change of strategy, but I'm not entirely sure what the end goal of the strategy is. It could be he wanted to change to protect BSV. I think also plausible is that he wanted to change to remain a leader in a group. So like with Bitcoin Cash, to talk highly about privacy is going to make people support you and like you and feel like, oh, this is the guy who's saying things that we like. And then once they broke away from Bitcoin Cash, I feel like there's a lot of people in BSV who are more statist. And so to change the rhetoric sort of makes him keep his relative position of being this person saying something that the group likes. So I think that also might be a play here. I'm still not convinced he cares about BSV more than his weird egotistical desire to be seen as somebody with prestige. Like sometimes I've waffled where I think, okay, he doesn't actually care about the prestige, but the more he writes, the more I think, okay, this is actually somebody who is trying to gain prestige and failing miserably. And so just sort of flailing about trying to have any shred of credibility. And if that means totally contradicting himself, then he'll do it.
So I think in some ways it could be the other way around. You could say when he was in BCH, he used the language of the community in order to achieve like a leadership position. But I think it's the reverse, where if you think you have a superior knowledge to everyone else about how this should be done, then you might see a leadership position as necessary. And I think it's more about him doing things in a way so that he can be in charge,
yeah,
because he believes he's the only one that can get this thing across the finish line. And I actually think a lot of the statist, authoritarian sounding language we're seeing from the BSV community is actually more from the big fans of Craig, who I think are mimicking his thinking. But if you look at a lot of the people, like a lot of the OGs, look at people like Kravitz and so forth, they don't really talk like that. You know, you still have a lot of like freedom lovers and
Sure
capitalists.
that Craig's army is worse than Craig itself. Like his army of people who worship him are some of the most annoying people on the internet.
Well, that's also a tactic. So maybe he's not directly playing to the statist audience, but he's sort of creating a statist audience. But also that's a tactic for somebody that wants to be a leader, closer to being something like a cult leader than an actual leader, than to take the contrary position and say, I have superior knowledge. And actually, Bitcoin was never supposed to be about privacy. And actually, it was also, now you're going to automatically get a subset of people who go, okay, this is a wise leader. We're going to listen to what he says and parrot what he says. And that's, you could sort of also achieve the goal of effectively being a leader by carving out a new position that you think people will be attracted to.
It seems probable it has less to do with, oh, there's statists in this new BSV fork, now I must appeal to them, or oh, I'm really a statist, now I can speak my mind. I suspect it has more to do with being so angry and pissed off at the people in BCH who stood in his way, and what they wanted to do with the protocol, I actually agree with him, was really stupid, and what he wanted to do with it was better. But he was really pissed off the people who stood in his way, notably Amaury, who's a self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist. And he's the type that must declare everything his enemies do, including what they eat for breakfast, to be immoral, right? It can't be like, Amaury is wrong about the protocol, but like his concerns about the state are valid. He can't do that. He can't be that guy. He can't give anything to his enemies. He must say they are the worst dressed, terrible at golf, bad father, and they're wrong about the protocol, and their ideology is immoral, right? And so I think it was kind of a lashing out against the people who were opposing him in BCH that made him go right towards that, and the fact that Roger sided with those guys and whatever, it's like, Roger's a libertarian, a voluntarist. Libertarians and voluntarists just want crime. Like, it was just about attacking his enemies, I suspect, more than anything.
And by the way, that's par for the course. That's what everybody in crypto does. Look at what people do to Craig. It's not like people out there are saying, yeah, I mean, at least the brother gets the protocol, right? At least the brother did say some things about Turing completeness that made us all think twice, right? No, they even lie about the protocol. If you listen to non-BSVers talk about the technology, they don't even give that up. They make it sound like BSV's tech is imploding every day.
Or the radical libertarian anti-statist in BTC who say that Roger Ver is a felon and
reporting him to the FEC,
expatriating, tax dodger and all these things, as if those are, against their beliefs.
Now, in that story, though, that seems to tell me that that Craig is not playing a high-level strategic game. In that story, that sounds like he's petty, very concerned about his public image, very spiteful, wants to hurt the people that he feels like have harmed him. And I think this is true. I think this is a true story.
I don't think you can deny it if you just watch any of his speeches in the last few years.
Yeah. So the idea that this is deliberate strategy because he thinks he is wise enough to take BSV into the promised land, I think that's less likely than the story in which he's very insecure and is trying to puff himself up and put others down for ego reasons.
The cult of
I don't
Craig
think those are exclusive at all.
It's very sociologically similar to QAnon type people. It's like there's always some plan that's going to work out. There's always something that's coming, and it's like the simpler explanation is just a leader who's just kind of wild and crazy and arrogant, and like, it's not some grand master plan to play the drunken fool and secretly, vanquish all your enemies behind the scenes and then have a big reveal like that. Just,
So let me actually defend that position really quickly, because I think that is the case. I think there is a lot of high level strategy going on, but I think we have to make a distinction between like good high level strategy that we agree with and bad high level strategy that nobody thinks is going to work, because you can't have both, right? So I think something that the history of science and technology well establishes is that the scientists who make the most interesting discoveries are usually not the people who succeed at presenting that information to the world in a way that's useful and accessible. The engineers and entrepreneurs almost always outperform the scientists in doing something with this knowledge that allows everyday people to put it in their homes and commercialize it. However, it's very easy to reverence the people with scientific insight so much that we make the mistake of thinking that their superior knowledge of the technology gives them an entrepreneurial advantage. So here's a statement that I think should be obviously true and is established by history, but I actually think it'll be controversial to a lot of people. Here's the statement. There is no reason at all to think that Satoshi Nakamoto, whatever your theory about him is, there's no reason at all to think Satoshi Nakamoto is a good entrepreneur. There's no reason at all to think that Satoshi Nakamoto has the skill of being able to be a waiter at a restaurant or to start a small business and actually generate revenue. I don't think there's any reason
Phil
to think that.
Wilson a stock boy at a grocery store when he wrote Bitcoin?
He was a security guard, I think.
Sorry. Continue, TK.
No, that's really not insulting at all, because Satoshi Nakamoto can be the genius that invents this amazing revolutionary technology, but there's no reason from history to think that that same person is going to be the one to make the magic happen.
Yeah.
Did the person who invented the internet give us YouTube and Google and TikTok and all these different types of
But I
things?
think I think it's a separate claim though. Like my only point is, watch Craig when he's supposed to debate somebody or whatever about whether Bitcoin's a security. I can't remember what that debate was. All signs point to someone who is reacting emotionally in the moment out of anger and ego, not someone who is putting on a deliberate show. He's so consistently easily provoked to walk away from the conversation with Hotep Jesus, to start lashing out and saying he's going to throw everyone in prison. I'm sure he's doing strategy on some level, but I think most of his public statements and behavior are a reflection of poor impulse control. It seems very unlikely to me that that's 5D chess and it's all deliberately crafted to look like a fool.
So I agree with that. And I don't know if anybody in BSV thinks that every one of Craig's emotions is part of 5D chess.
There are people who think that, I'm pretty sure.
All right, I'll concede that. But I think the reason that he is in those situations where he is being so easily triggered emotionally is because his strategy is putting him there. Like Craig could easily avoid these types of moments, but he's constantly, his strategy is constantly putting himself in corners where he looks like he's contradictory, and it's making him an easy target. And because he's not going to tell everything that he knows, because he's playing some kind of strategy, he's limited in what he can say. And I think that makes it easy for him to lose his cool and have these emotional moments.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that idea because there's something that happens here I see all the time with the difference between the theoretician and the practitioner. So something that can happen is theoreticians can think highly of their theories and believe that the fact that they are good theoreticians implies that they are good practitioners, which is definitely not the case, nor anything close to being the case. So Craig might be in a situation where he thinks to himself, okay, I have some superior theoretical knowledge, which means I'm a really smart guy, which means that whatever my high level strategy is going to be great. And then as soon as he tries to implement any part of his actual real world strategy, he fails. People laugh at him. It's miserable because the strategy is actually bad. And then he has a strong emotional reaction to it. And it kind of builds on itself. I think that is a very plausible description of what's happening, which is why I think so many people who are successful in the academy literally cannot succeed in the real world because they think so. They have developed a theory of the world that is a wrong theory, so that doesn't help. But also they think so highly of it that as soon as they try to implement it in practice, it's going to fail. And that makes them feel so terrible about themselves and so embarrassed that they immediately say, okay, well, I'm just going to stay in the academy and live in theory land because they can't handle the idea that what they've prided themselves on, they're totally wrong. And I feel like that's a really good description, a plausible description of Craig's story.
Academics. The worst, aren't they, Steve?
They are the worst.
Derek, Ray Dillinger, he's given up on Bitcoin. He's pulled a Mike Hearn. Tell me about
that was an interesting conversation the other day. I mean,
Yeah,
I didn't agree with all his
give our
points. I
viewers a
didn't
little
agree-
give our viewers a little backdrop.
Oh, well, so if you guys know Ray, Ray was one of the first people to respond to Satoshi Nakamoto on the cryptography mailing list. Not only was he one of the first people to respond on the cryptography mailing list, but he, according to him, and I mean, there's not a ton of evidence, but according to him, he and Hal were the first people to actually look at Satoshi's code outside of Satoshi or the Satoshi Nakamoto team himself. So he and Hal were in private conversations with Satoshi, where they discussed, among other things, the block size, adding the block size limit, which is, according to him, Hal's idea. And according to him and Satoshi had talked about, this was always the plan to get rid of the limit. The limit was just a temporary thing. Hal was really scared of some potential problems, and so they added the limit. Ray has released the early code. I think he was like the only person who had it. So there's evidence that he did. He hasn't shared any emails between him and Satoshi. But the other thing that we do know is I think Ray. Oh no, I'm perhaps wrong. Yeah, sorry, I was going to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm wrong there. But yeah, so Ray has released the early code that he had. Really interesting guy. He basically posted to the cryptography mailing list the other day that he thinks Bitcoin is a disaster. One of the reasons he thinks that is because the scaling limitations, the artificial block size scarcity, led to people basically reinventing the banking system on top of Bitcoin, and or the legacy finance system. And I think that's pretty much accurate. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing now is that onboarding is going to be done through PayPal and other custodial systems. And where I think he's wrong is, and then he talked about too, like the army of trolls that was hired to derail the conversations. And I think he compared it to a gutter sewer knife fight or something like that.
He seemed to think that the miners were the ones that hired the
yeah,
trolls.
that's where I think he's wrong is both that the miners are the ones who are responsible, and that not only that, but that ASIC mining was maybe harmful to the system too. I think he's wrong on both of those points. The interesting point I thought he made was the idea that government subsidized energy in China has centralized mining in a way that's unhealthy for Bitcoin and ripe for regulatory capture. And that's an interesting point. The idea that like a state could capture Bitcoin by basically stealing electricity from electrical companies and giving it to miners. And then miners just all go to that particular region. And now they're in one of the most corrupt states in the world. And that's an opportunity to really capture the system. The other thing I asked him was, do you think that the block size should have been raised? And he said, yeah, absolutely. I think it should have been raised. So he's still of the opinion that the blocks should have been increased and that the centralization of mining wouldn't have been a problem in a free market, but that Satoshi basically did not account for the fact that these hostile states or these totalitarian states would have unfairly cheap electricity.
I think that's I think that's a valid criticism. That's I've heard like Andreas Antonopoulos sort of touch on this indirectly, and I think this is naive of him. He says something like, if the miners don't behave, why we'll just, it's like the dog's barking. And what do you do when the dogs bark? Well, you pick up a big rock and threaten to throw it at them. And I think his idea is like, well, the devs will protect us from miner centralization in one country if it's a problem, and they'll just fork it away and then it won't be a problem. I think that's very naive. I think, especially if you have a lot of commerce that's built on Bitcoin already, the idea that you're going to have a radical dev change like that, change the fundamentals like that. I don't think that
goes against everything that they've taught. I mean, if you end up in a situation like that, what else can they change? I mean, you give the devs the power to suddenly say, hey, we're changing all of this to fork these miners off or keep these miners away. Like, that's a huge change. So now the question becomes, well, how resistant to capture really is Bitcoin?
Well, right. Then now you're saying the devs get to pick the miners that they like.
Yeah, which is definitely the position that a lot of devs take, that they are the ones in charge here. Yeah.
Which is scary because who watches the watchers? Something that we haven't spent hardly any time on, and we've done these videos for a couple of years now. First we're doing on YouTube. We moved them all to Streamanity. I think I might post this one to YouTube because Derek was begging me to. Derek doesn't beg. That's a inaccurate description.
I demanded. I told you I would
Yeah,
walk.
exactly. You demanded. BTC. So all of us, I guess with the exception of TK, and TK, I don't say that as a dig. We've been around this for a long time for, I don't know what you count as an OG, but 2011, 2012, 2013 at the latest. And we all have
I was
our
actually
reasons.
earlier. I was the main part of it, actually.
I started in the 90s here.
Derek was drunk and high the whole time. I was really doing it all. Unfortunately, I have amnesia and I don't remember any of the important parts. But we all have our reasons for our strong feelings that Bitcoin was always meant to be big blocks, and that big block Bitcoin is the Bitcoin we got excited about. And if it's not big block Bitcoin, it loses almost all of the attributes we were excited about and opens up all kinds of new risks, et cetera. But there's probably a lot of people that are pretty new, whether in the 2017 bull run or this current bull run, getting excited about this stuff. And maybe I'll title this something on YouTube that's clickbaity that gets people to watch it. BTC. I want to hear your steel man. What's the best case scenario for BTC as not only successful as an asset that increases in value, which I think we will all admit is very possible, if not probable, at least in the near term, but its success as global money, as something that could be a liberty expanding thing. Like, what's the best argument for BTC, which would require something like Lightning or some other second layer? And then what are the reasons that you don't buy that argument?
Geez, that's hard. I
mean, you have to
think
It's like, I know it's like, hey, can you condense like 5 years of torturous thought?
So
what did the Nazis get right?
The best argument that I have is basically that it grows so big that the economic pressure to raise the block size outweighs the authority of the existing developer groups. That might be something that could potentially make Bitcoin succeed. Another reason would be something like, I guess, if Lightning Network were to succeed, I honestly don't even think that if Lightning Network worked, that it would necessarily be a good thing for Bitcoin, because I think that there's just too much opportunity for capture if only a small number of people are settling transactions every day on chain. So if you end up in a situation where it's just a group of banks who are settling and everybody else's funds are in Lightning, even if Lightning is like infinitely perfectly scalable, if the on-chain fees are prohibitively high for people to actually get access to their Bitcoin, and you're thinking about majority of the world, they're not living on large amounts of money. So if someone has a couple $100 in savings, they're not going to be storing that on chain if the fees are a couple $100 or more, right? So people's entire lives are locked in the Lightning Network, and if they want to settle, they've got to go and use some sort of settlement firm or something like that, which will likely be highly regulated because they'll be very, very large. I guess there's theoretical technologies that could be developed that would change this, but to me, that's the problem with the system is like, even with Lightning Network working, it's not that exciting to me.
So for you to get excited about it, they would have to change the protocol and become big block.
Well, or they would have to kick the can down the road sort of indefinitely. They don't necessarily, I think BTC could succeed with like marginal block size increases every once in a while and kind of kick the can down the road. Maybe. It's hard to say though. There's an argument to be made that a marginal increase can't work, that you can only be tiny blocks or unbounded blocks. The idea being that like miners need to profit either from economy of scale or from sort of like artificial scarcity or something like that, right?
Which was kind of what you and all of us were sort of ripping on Amari Sachet's vision of BCH for, like, hey, we'll be the moderately sized block Bitcoin.
Yeah. Basically, like it doesn't work if it's like you just keep raising it a little bit, because you're always going to hit that limit and the same problem's going to happen anyway. Like the fees are going to go up. The only way it works is if you can allow massive numbers of transactions with low fees, or artificial scarcity. So maybe that won't work. Maybe that won't work either, but it could kick the can down the road for a while. As long as the price goes up, and the price could keep going up for a long time, raising the block size could keep BTC, working well as cash for quite a long time, even if they didn't do large increases to the block size because the subsidy will pay for mining.
Yeah, that's plausible. I think but what's crazy is, if you do a 8 megabyte block size increase, you're talking an 8-fold throughput increase, which is substantial. And you do that a few times and suddenly you do have a lot of capacity for usage. So I think the only way BTC achieves that type of vision is by changing, by people not using it as it is. It either needs to have bigger blocks or they're going to have to use, I think the only hope is sidechains. I think what's his face is working on, but a sidechain is essentially not using BTC. It's like, yeah, Paul Stork. Yeah. Like it's okay. You stake your BTC. So maybe there's some correlation there. So that's how you're using BTC, but you're actually using something else. I mean, they broke the technology. So it's hard to steel man the situation where they just broke the technology and just, it still has hope. I mean, like you could still, there's nothing preventing them from doing big block size increases. I just don't think that's a realistic world.
One thing that could prevent it is the opposite of the economic pressure idea that I made, that like economic pressure could be used to put pressure to raise the block size, but like it could also be, big institutions being very conservative saying like, hey, we just want this to be a store of value. We don't want the block size to increase and we don't want to risk a hard fork that could damage the value of our coins.
Yeah.
And so if you end up in a situation where you've got a lot of institutional investment in highly regulated countries, there's a lot of power to basically hold guns up to the developers and say, don't raise the block size. Like if you do that, you're going to be a criminal.
I think
these were the threats that were used by Adam Back and his goons back in 2017 about SegWit2x is basically, hey, we prepared decisive legal action against anyone who manages to actually fork Bitcoin on a chain that doesn't have replay protection or all that stuff. Like if you do that, we're bringing the big guns to come after you and sue you or worse. And so think about now, there's a lot more money in Bitcoin. Think about these Wall Street guys and these big funds, Grayscale, and all these groups investing in Bitcoin. Are they going to see that a block size increase or a controversial hard fork as a threat to their money? I mean, so it's likely that it's already too late to raise the block size too.
Yeah. I think practically speaking, it's just not going to happen. It's like you have to have a total difference of philosophy.
Well, this is what pisses me off so much, though, right? Because economic pressure is part of the security model of Bitcoin. So like the devs in their naivete basically saw security as purely a function of like how many nodes you're running or something stupid like that, as opposed to scale. So like Bitcoin at scale, even with big blocks, there's a lot of economic pressure to keep the system running properly, right? Because the more people who use it around the world, the more pressure there is to not, screw it up. So the irony is basically that same thing could actually now stop Bitcoin from saving itself, basically.
When you say saving itself, do you think that in the long run, there is hope for the store of value only dopey idea that they have for BTC? Do you think that actually could succeed?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like probably not. I mean, if it could go up for a long time. I mean, we could see hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think, for the value of a coin, because with artificial scaling limitations that are sort of worked around with centralized providers and custodians, like there's no,
as long as people are willing to put money in it. Right?
Yeah. So I think what happens,
get away with his shit?
I think what happens is there's going to be investors, these big investors at a certain point, and I've seen some evidence of this too, and hearing from people who are talking to big Wall Street type investors who are basically like doing the math and deciding at what point is it no longer going to give me the same returns that another asset would. And at that point, if the price increases start to slow, because it just doesn't there's no way that you're going to get the kind of level that would be necessary to continue Bitcoin's historic gains, then it may not go up forever. You may actually see money exiting the system and saying, hey, I'm looking for something else. I want to actually, and the thing is too, I mean, it feels like I could be wrong. I mean, it feels like it's a system though that necessitates at some point people cashing out basically, because it's like the whole meme, it's like,
They have to, because you
The Back
can't
to the
use it to
Future?
buy anything. You have to
yeah,
convert it.
there's the Back to the Future meme, where it's like, where we're going, you won't need it, or something like that. And that's like
Yeah.
used in Bitcoin. It's like, how are you going to cash out your Bitcoin? And they're like, oh, well, when we get to the point where you're not going to need to do it, that's not true necessarily. If
Unless the tech changes.
Unless
like,
the tech changes.
if Bitcoin is reliant on the fiat system, you're always going to need to basically sell some Bitcoin to someone else in order to participate in the real world, the rest of the economy.
And that's why central banks don't give a shit. They're not threatened by that, because every time you sell, they get to tax you and you're back on their system and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah,
unless you can use it to purchase stuff and to say, oh, well, we'll figure that out in the future. No, whatever you figure out in the future will be completely regulated and controlled and cajoled by the banks to make sure that they're not threatened. So like, if you don't have it figured out now, you're screwed. It's an investment speculative asset that could go up in value because you believe people are going to believe in it, but it's not going to change the future of money.
But play the story out even longer. So, okay, we reach the point where it's 100K, it's 200K, and people go, nobody, it's not going higher than this. People start selling. Then what? Do we have a situation in which when the price goes down far enough, we have a collapse and then, nobody uses it anymore? Or is it that the religion is so strong that once Bitcoin goes back down to 100,000, then a bunch of stupid people go, okay, well, now we can buy it again because it's a store of value, and does it persist? Like what, in what scenario?
You could have
Yeah,
either.
in what scenario is BTC a failure? If the only reason people are buying it is because the price goes up and it's a store of value because people say it is, how does it fail?
I think over time, it gets to the point where pretty much only professional investors are buying it anymore. Because there's no reason for other people to buy it, right? Like if the price increases slow down and eventually, hits some peak or whatever, then if people go to sell, if enough people go to sell, I mean, this system could be completely screwed. Like people could be like, there could be a run on the Bitcoin bank.
But
right?
if it's only the investors playing that game, I don't know how likely that scenario is, because they're going to go, just wait till next week.
If everybody
Trading is frozen.
If all the non-investor types are slowly selling all the way up, then maybe you can escape that scenario. But the more holders there are, the more people that will try at some point, because they can't do anything with their money, and all these single guys living in their basement with no wife but got rich off of Bitcoin, and now they need to like do something with it that actually improves their quality of life. They go to sell, and now it's stuck in them. They got to pay a $5,000 fee, and it's stuck in the meme pool for an indefinite amount of time. And then everybody else hears this and they all panic and they all start like, I don't know. There's all kinds of crazy scenarios. The tech is so screwed up. When lots of people try to use it at once, I really don't know exactly.
Even then, in that scenario, you're saying that people are going to be making on-chain transactions. Well, in 5 years, 10 years in the future, nobody's going to be using the on-chain transactions. What taking your money out of BTC is just getting the credit withdrawal from PayPal.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Yeah, that's possible. But I think in that scenario, the price of Bitcoin is going to be severely capped, because you got to factor in all the risks involved of those third parties, and the fact that you're not provably collecting. You can't prove the supply anymore if you're using tokens that are issued by a third party.
I just feel like we're entering this weird zone where I'm starting to believe that we could see an asset come into existence that people buy because they think it's going to go up in value. And then there is a religious narrative about it is a store of value because we just treat it as a store of value. It's a shared hallucination.
It literally could be gold 2.0, where people treat it just the same way they do gold. Some people hold it.
Right.
But it doesn't make huge jumps very often. It's pretty whatever.
And if that's not the world we're living in, though, I'm trying to play out the failure scenario. And because the price is the only metric that matters for people that are buying BTC, it's actually hard for me to play out the final scenario in which BTC is a failure, because as long as that religious narrative is.
Oh, did we lose Steve?
yeah.
Okay, I'll finish his thought for him.
Is continuing. Bummer.
Oh,
It was about math.
You're back. You're back. Well, Steve, here's what I'll say. I think you're right. I think there's a 50% chance that Bitcoin stays around indefinitely and is just another asset that people can park some money in. And it's like gold, where nobody's actually holding the physical thing in their house. A few people are, but people are buying and selling certificates of gold and whatever. And it's all part of a regulated industry. And it's not really revolutionizing the world. It's just another place to park money. And there's a 50% chance scenario where the whole thing collapses. And that collapse scenario could be either technical, like chain death. It could be Ponzi, like Tether all of a sudden implodes because it was all fake to begin with. And then, or it could be regulatory, where a government just kills it. All of those are literally any of those could happen like way faster than anyone acknowledges. It could be like tomorrow. That's possible. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'd even put that at a less than 50% chance at this point of happening in the next, 10 years ever. And then the other 50% that it's just a boring asset that doesn't disrupt anything. It's just another place to park money. And the people who got in early made a bunch of money.
That's such a funny idea to me. I think that's actually the world we're going to. And I think what we're going to have is, BTC is going to be a high price. People aren't going to know why they're buying it. And then at some point, some crazy investors are going to go, wow, here's Bitcoin 2.0. It's like Bitcoin, except you can use it in commerce. Wow, what a revolutionary idea. We're just going to play the story again.
That's where we are. Michael
It's so
Saylor just
funny.
put $500 million in Bitcoin and then tweeted that it's encrypted.
It's so funny.
He doesn't even know that it's not encrypted.
It's just so funny to me.
It's like, you can't even believe that. It's insane. TK, what would it take for you to be excited about BTC?
Oh, you're muted. Or is that?
Oh, he's muted. No, it doesn't look like he's muted. It's just not working. Zoom is discriminating. What happened?
Testing.
There
you
we
go.
go.
Testing.
You're back.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's so funny what you guys are saying because, okay, because yeah, I think the game can stay alive for as long as there are people willing to play it, and people will be willing to play the game as long as you're creating a narrative that supports it. I think people will believe anything, man, as long as the right person tells them. Case in point, is BTC the original Bitcoin? What do most people believe versus what does the white paper say? Right? Like it's not about the truth. It's not about the arguments that you can give about the facts. It's about the narrative that people choose to subscribe to. And I think BTC could go on for a long time. And as the saying goes, the market can be irrational longer than you can remain solvent. It can be irrational longer than you can hang around and give out your arguments. I even think there's a winning scenario. I think, Isaac mentioned it, where they just double down on the gold narrative and you just take the whole fiat system. Let's say fiat just kind of bottoms out, which, let's say Peter Schiff is right about where fiat is headed right now. And they just anchor it all in BTC. Why wouldn't people be willing to pay those high fees to reinvent the same system, but have what they believe to be a superior form of gold? I think it would be exceptionally easy to convince people that was what Bitcoin was really about, as long as the right people tell them. I don't see that as improbable at all. BTC could do that. Now, I think the only scenario where BTC loses is if it is actually killed by a stronger force. So, Steve, I don't know which one of you said it, but I don't believe in this idea that that one person or 20 people are going to try to sell their BTC. They're going to see how hard it is to get out, and then everybody's going to rush out. They're going to need a reason for that, a reason that's really compelling. And the only thing I think that can happen to kill BTC would be if an alternative chain was doing something so interesting and so exciting that was drawing the miners or getting major transactions, and what people begin to see for themselves that what they wanted in BTC is being given somewhere else and all the more, and then they rush out. I can see a scenario like that killing BTC. As far as what could make me excited about BTC, I mean, I told you guys, like, I see the world of investments as being much bigger than crypto. Crypto is like the fringe of the world of investments. There are a lot of things that excite me about it, but in this crypto space, the only thing that captures my attention is BSV. And if that doesn't do anything, all right, cool. We'll go to this exciting, broader world out there beyond this crazy world of crypto. But there's nothing happening in BTC that interests me at all. I think it may go up and make a lot of money for a lot of people, but you know, if I'm going to gamble, I'm just going to gamble on the NBA, something that I actually enjoy paying attention.
Have fun staying poor.
I feel like
Sorry, I think that meme is both so dumb and
It's
so
so bad.
hilarious.
I feel like we're potentially witnessing something really historic here, and I wonder how many times this has happened, where there are social trends, socio-religious trends, that are so firm in our culture that the origin of which are like laughably stupid. Like I could imagine a generation from now, we have kids. They are raised in a world in which everybody knows that the highest store of value is BTC. And I can also imagine in which, you know, they don't know the history, they don't know the story, and it's this ridiculous, empty version of reality in which like the liars won and convinced enough people to literally create a religious social trend, and it worked. And that's incredible to me. That's incredible that can happen. I can sort of see it happen in real time. I just wonder how many other things are like this. Like how many other pillars of cultural norms do we have in which it was the scoundrels and the charlatans that has effectively got their narrative pushed into the public?
Well, I mean, that's how we got
consciousness.
everything. That's how we got the Federal Reserve. I mean, that's how we got a lot of the stuff right now. And that's how we got income tax. I mean, you look back at some of this stuff that was like completely contrary to the vision of the founders, which is now accepted as like the most like non-controversial thing. I mean, you can even question it. You're a crazy person. I mean, imagine like the income tax is only like 100 years old.
Part of the American fabric, even though the founders literally started the country because they were opposing a tax.
Yeah, well, income tax was not even constitutional in the original, you know, vision. So that's what's so great when you think about like there's narratives everywhere that have a religious like significance, or at least the sense in which people don't question them in the same way that they don't question a religious dogma, and that's everywhere. I mean, that's everywhere.
And this one about money was created by all people, by a group of cypherpunk libertarians who then got corrupted. They were low status. They thought, I can make money and gain prestige by pretending BTC is something important that you just have to buy and hold because God said so. And it was, of all people, it's the libertarian cypherpunks that did this. Shocking.
Well, and I mean, look at it. Like, let's say that scenario plays out, and it's just this other asset you can park money in. It hasn't made the world worse. It's given an additional asset for people to have another option. And then it's made all the people who got into it early rich. So they have no incentive at all to like, as long as the price keeps going up and up and up, it's like, I'm getting rich. How could this be bad? See, the market's saying I'm right. And it's not even that it's bad. It's just that it is completely fallacious to claim that it is what Bitcoin was intended to be and what everyone initially got excited about. And even what the core people still claim that Bitcoin is. It's not that anymore. It's not some threat to central banks that's going to discipline them or anything like that remotely. You're naive to the point of foolishness if you think that. But it is an asset that's going up in value and may do so for a long time and may be worth a lot for a long time, you know, and may compete with gold. That is actually a possibility, even though it really does nothing else.
And for a lot of people out there, that's the only form of winning that matters. So telling them that they aren't winning just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I'm not going to argue with that. Like, if your definition of winning is I got rich off it, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, good for you. I'm excited that people make money, even if they're making money speculating or whatever, even if it's on accident. Like, that's cool. I hold nothing against them. I don't think that's wrong. It doesn't excite me as a, you know, it excites me potentially as a way to make a bunch of money, but I don't trust that outcome enough to go pour all my life savings into BCTC. I think there's a lot of ways in which it could lose. But I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't excite me the way that Bitcoin excited me when I discovered it. And that some alternate implementations still potentially excite me.
Right. And I think it's also, it's at least frustrating to see this technology that's, you know, appreciated so much in price. Its existence also effectively destroyed, at least for a short period of time, a superior technology that actually could have made the world a radically freer and better place, where people are actually accessing the blockchain and you get effective hard money because people can access the underlying technology. So it feels like, you know, part of the cost of
the opportunity
BTC
cost.
exactly is that system that could have been, man, that makes it sting a bit.
and maybe it never could have been. Maybe it was always naive. But there's a part of me that thinks if it had continued on the trajectory of adoption at a fast enough speed to outpace the regulators and get big enough to where you couldn't ultimately kill it, there was a chance. There was a chance. Once we went from adoption to de-adoption, somewhere in 2016, that was the moment when I think it was over. And that was all because of full blocks, but who knows?
It's annoying, it feels like not much has actually changed. I mean, in the last many years, the only thing that's really changed is the number's gone up. When you think about what more has been done in Bitcoin recently, that's like super exciting. There's some cooler little apps, like I use Fold every day. It's kind of fun, but there's not a whole lot that like I see. To me, the energy level seems worse in many ways than years ago. It seems like there was a lot more just like interesting stuff happening years ago.
Well, when the price is going up, it's always worse, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody has an incentive to build.
Yeah, and that's great. I love the price going up. But what else is happening?
I like the price going up too. It's fun.
Here's my concern about BSV and something that I would like to see more of in the community, so to speak. Think about nice guy syndrome. Think about the guy who, as a dating strategy, agrees with every girl because he thinks that that's going to make her fall in love with him. He laughs at jokes that he doesn't really think is funny. He says, yeah, nods his head and is very accommodating. And that girl goes off and she dates some other guy who's a bad guy. And the good guy's all butthurt about it. The good guy's like, well, I agreed with you and I supported you and I'm there for you and I listen to you complain and I help you move and and you like this bad guy. And the good guy is just self-righteously frustrated and upset, not getting what he wants. And he lives in this unfair universe where people make irrational decisions and give their loyalty to those who don't deserve it. Sometimes the BSV community sounds like that to me. And it's sort of like, you're not going to get anywhere in this world by thinking of yourself as good and thinking of other people as bad and waiting for something bad to happen to them so that you can be the one who wins the loyalty of the girl or the world by default. That just doesn't happen, right? The analogy that I gave on Twitch is it's like there's some girl you've asked out like 30 times. She said no and laughed in your face every time. But then you find out that she dumped her boyfriend and you're celebrating.
No,
Guess what?
You're going to wait till she's on her third divorce when you're 50 and you're going to still be there and she'll finally realize you were always the one she should have been.
Yeah, she's never going to realize it, man. That day is never coming. So what do you do? What do you do when you take that hard pill? You focus on making yourself valuable. You stop thinking with a low value mindset and you stop saying, I'm going to achieve victory by making sure that everybody who gets in the way is arrested or thrown in prison or that they get sued or something like that. You stop worrying about Peter McCormack. You stop worrying about Adam Back. Stop worrying about all those guys. And you focus on what makes you valuable, what makes your projects valuable, and you try to do something that kind of takes ownership for creating the victory that you want to see. I think that's not an argument for what anybody should do, but I think that is a description of the only way that BSV is going to win. And I want BSV to win.
I'm going to write the Craig Wright guide to dating. And it's going to be something like planting drugs or child porn on the girl's boyfriend, getting him thrown in Thai jail.
To see your enemies flee before you, to hear the lamentations of their women. Conan the Barbarian. Should we post this to Streamanity or YouTube?
Streamanity is fine with me. I'm good with that.
I was going to go YouTube. I feel like
whatever you guys want.
Beginning of the year, Numpty reunion.
I'm Streamanity, man.
Let's take advantage of the bull run and get some wider
did we talk about enough interesting stuff to warrant YouTube? I feel like YouTube's a bigger audience, or was this too like insular, or was it good?
TK.
Here's my 10-second case.
I don't care about the audience, I guess, but still.
Here's my 10-second case for Streamanity. We can get 10,000 views on YouTube, and what is that going to do for you? Nothing. You can get 10.
That's not true. No, that's not true.
What is it going to do? So what?
I've gotten many opportunities from our YouTube channel. I'm sorry that you haven't monetized it, but I have.
No, likewise. I've gotten
Why y'all have to do me like that, man?
I've gotten a lot of opportunities.
Being
I mean, not even-
uncreative.
not even trying.
You're supposed to be Mr. You're supposed to be more creative than this.
like TK, not even trying. Like I'm building a company utterly unrelated to. I'm
Not
not-
even
I was just like, dude, TK, we're not even trying. What
No,
are you
but
doing,
like-
man? What
I'm
a
sorry. I
failure.
didn't mean to
These
let you
videos-
have it like that, TK. I'm sorry.
No, people coming to me and begging to come on and get interviewed, saying, "Hey, look at my project. I've gotten speaking engagements and podcast invites and things." Like, aren't you like a public intellectual, a professional speaker? Don't you want exposure? Do you ever heard of marketing?
Yeah, you sound like one of those academics who only wants to post under
You're like, "Hey, man, check it out.
What it
On
is,
Humanity, I'm gonna make $40. YouTube, I might get 10,000 people,
No,
and some
look,
of those might,
let me finish this sentence, man.
Okay.
Because I didn't tell you what I think we get from Streamanity. I
All
didn't
right.
tell you what I think we get. I was just saying, what are you going to get from YouTube? All right, so obviously you guys are getting gigs from YouTube. I don't look to YouTube to give me anything like that. But
Oh,
obviously
see how
you guys get-
you the fact that you're not getting gigs, you tried to use it as a way of being superior. I don't look to YouTube like that.
Look,
you are
man, I'm
talking to the
cool.
Netflix guy, okay? I mean, let's be fair.
True.
Yeah, TK's on Netflix. Go ahead.
No, but seriously, like I just love using SV, man. I think, like, to be honest, what's the point of using Twitch? Like, I get more views on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, I get more.
I love
opportunity
using
for that.
Streamanity and I love using Twitch, which is why I've posted these exclusively to Streamanity for at least a year. It's so fun. It's awesome. The tech it's an infinitely superior experience for creators, but nobody can onboard. Nobody's there. And sometimes I just want other people who are new to this stuff who ask me, "Hey, cool, what's this?" It's so freaking hard to explain. And then I'm like, "Oh, go try Twitch." And they can't do it because they got to create a wallet and they got to do all this stuff that they can't do on their cell phone right there. So like, I don't know, every once in a while, I want to let the broader world get a little bit of an understanding of the kind of conversations going on over there.
Hey, wherever y'all are watching this, whether it be on YouTube or Streamanity, I wish you well, and leave a comment, do whatever it is that this platform.
We don't do that kind of chilly and cheesy stuff about comments and you know what I mean? That's not our style.
Hey man, work whatever platform you choose to be on, bro.
Maybe we'll put it on
Comments are
Streamanity
always
first and
amazing
then put
too
it on
on
YouTube
YouTube.
later.
Maybe TK just doesn't want to face that one dude who kept commenting that TK was drinking fake water or something like that.
Yes.
He's like,
People
feel
say-
safe and secure on Streamanity.
Every time I drink something now, I have to make sure that it looks real because people.
You gotta
claim
take a big
TK
gulp.
Yeah, TK
Alright.
was pretending to drink water.
Either this cup is halfway full or it's completely empty. I want all the viewers to let us know
Take a drink,
what's really
take a
going
drink.
on. Is this a real drink?
Okay, let's see. I think TK is a deep fake anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but I
Nobody
think the
drinks
angle
that
was too
slow.
high.
Nobody holds the glass
TK
that long and that deliberately.
There's no milk mustache. I don't know.
That's
TK
that's
is
fair.
actually an AI built on Anne in the BSV blockchain. Like
Yes.
he's not even a real person.
the YouTube comments are pretty amazing.
But they
pretty
gave us our name. So
Yeah.
All right, boys. This was a good time. Until the next time.
Thanks, guys.